Whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Hey, good morning. I am going to get this meeting called to order. This is the meeting of the NIAA Membership Committee, our very first meeting for this year. So calling to order at 8:34. I'm going to do some roll call here. So when I say your name, just please say here or present. Ryan Au,
Present.
John Glover,
Present.
Dave Henneman,
Present.
Jim Pace,
Present.
me here. Thank you. Allie Shireen, Jay Schroeder. Wait on Jay too. Okay, Dan Senger, Rollin Stallworth, Mike Strong,
Present.
Doug Wilbur,
Present.
Chris Zuno, myself, Kate Segroy, Tim Jackson. I know you're there.
Present.
And Paul,
Sorry.
and Paul Anderson, you're good.
Here.
Thank you. Okay. So hopefully our other few members will hop in here if they are just running a little bit late. Okay, on to public comment. Tia, if you wouldn't mind just scrolling down a little bit there. So this time provides an opportunity for citizens to address the committee about any matter not on the agenda. Items raised during this portion of the agenda cannot be deliberated or acted upon should a member of the public wish to speak on a matter not listed on the agenda. It is asked that said person please complete a green public comment card and submit it to the committee chair prior to the opening of this item. Members of the public who have submitted public comment by email will have their email read into the record. A limit of 3 minutes per person and or 5 minutes for the spokesperson of a particular group may be imposed. It is requested that comments be directed to the committee as a whole. Comments that are determined to be irrelevant, repetitious, offensive, inflammatory, willfully disruptive, or deemed to be personal attacks will not be permitted. Okay, at this time, is there anybody in the NIAA office, Tim?
Nope.
There's nobody here. And I did not receive any emails or anything related to any items that we had. So we will move on if there is no public comment. All right, next item 4. Tia, if you could scroll down.
It looks like it kind of jumps because now we're going into NRSs here.
Say that again.
It looks like it jumps. So when I scroll past the agenda, it goes to committee and then it jumps directly to team definitions. So I'm not sure what you want me to show right here.
I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing you scroll at all, though.
I'm scrolling. That's weird.
Maybe
Is it this one? Can you see this screen?
There we go.
Okay, there we go. Sorry.
No, you're good. Okay, so this is the agenda. So our next item is just the approval of the agenda. So looking for a motion to approve and ask that it's just flexible in case we need to combine any items or move out of order.
I approve the agenda.
Okay, that Dave. And looking for a second to approve the agenda.
Jim Pace will second it.
Thanks, Jim. All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to 5. You'll notice on page 5 is where some of our Nevada administrative codes start. So basically what we're going to use this meeting as is to go through our regulations that are related, number 1, related to membership, new membership, continuing membership, anything related to that. This regulation that we'll talk about, teams, is one that's come up at the Board of Control, as well as the Rules, Regulations, and Policies Committee. It's kind of been tossed around. So I'll talk about this in a second. But generally this section here, we're just going to review all of our regulations. I have it for discussion, but possible action, and really the possible action is for this regulation, since I said it has kind of hopped around from committee to committee in the board regarding how we want to move with this. It's a brand new regulation. The rest of them, I would really suggest that we just discuss them, come up with any thoughts that you have about changes that we might want to look at, and then we can reconvene after we address some of those changes or take a deeper look into each of those and kind of fully understand what they mean. And then we can possibly act on them at a later meeting. So we'll start with this one since this is the only one I really think we should possibly take action on. This regulation is brand new. We don't have currently a definition for team. And what we have here is just a list of the minimum number that we've determined is, collectively for that sanctioned sport to be considered a team. So some of the conversation we've had back and forth with the rules and regulations and at the board is, what is the purpose of this definition? Are we saying it for the purposes of membership? Are we saying it for the purposes of postseason? Are we saying it for the membership or for the purposes of, just in general that you have, students that can make points as a team? So really that's where we have to start this conversation is what is the purpose of this definition? Do we want to keep it as a defined term, or do we want to, if it's about membership, do we want to have a separate regulation that's solely about membership and maintaining your membership based on having a full team? So I think that's really where this conversation needs to start is what is the purpose of this, the intent of this, and what do we feel is the best course of action, having it as a definition for all terms anytime we say the word team, or having it more specifically related to membership, which I think is more of the original intent on it. So really opening it up for discussion and in what we think based on conversations you've had or listening to board of control or listening to RRP meetings, what we think about this and the numbers.
Well, I'll start it, I think, with the way it looks to me, this particular page would be for participation in a state tournament or regional and state. Just for the fact that if it's to keep your membership, the lower level schools, we may struggle in some years. And I don't think we should be penalized for that.
And I think that was part of the conversation, Jim, that you were in that meeting too, that we brought up about the fact that we have, there is a minimum for regional and state based on NFHS rules and things like that. So is it even necessary to have a rule specifically about what constitutes a team for those things? So that's, I think, part of the conversation of maybe we don't necessarily look at this as a team definition and more we talk about, okay, to maintain your membership for a team, you have to have this or that. Or maybe we separate it from to enter as a new school and to maintain your membership, because I think that's different. Or we separate it out from schools that are, enrollment-based public schools, separate from private and charters that may have more of an opportunity to bring more kids in, and they're not necessarily, bound by their enrollment for their residential zone. So that's a good point, bringing up those smaller schools. Other thoughts?
Dave Henneman, just looking at this, I know with you have teams coming in or like schools coming in for membership, they say, hey, you got to have a team for each season. And I know some of the smaller schools, like the smaller charter schools, say, hey, we'll do cross country, but they'll have like one girls cross country runner. I think the problem is when it gets later on in the when that girl eventually graduates and they don't gain any more runners, they lose that team for that season. I know that there's some charter schools out there that do not have a girls sport in a certain season because they had it when they got their membership, but eventually they don't. So I was just wondering, this is something that when we look at these new members coming in, are they going to be able to maintain these teams? Because I don't want like a school saying, well, we're going to focus on sport A. And so sport B, if it falls off, that's okay. We had it to get membership. But now that we have membership, I don't care about sport B because we're a sport A type of school, and that's what you want to focus everything on. So it's just one of those things that worries me, like especially when you have the like the 3A league and 2A leagues, and they're like expecting these teams to play for their league games, and now they have to scramble because now there's not a team, and that in that particular sport.
Great point. I think that's another kind of push for why it might be better to separate this out to be, more of a specific regulation regarding membership, gaining membership or maintaining membership, and whether that needs to be, one regulation with multiple different sections or, I think that's really what we need to determine is what's the best way to do this. Because I think as we said, we don't necessarily need a definition for how many you need to compete in regionals or state. We know that number. Other thoughts? I'm gonna mark you present, Jay.
Well, you can tell it's Monday morning.
I know. Core planning on my part, but
No, it's good planning because then everybody's very attentive. Not vocal. So Kate, I jumped on here too, because I'm struggling with that regulation that I helped foster about maintaining a program, and this kind of falls into that.
Yep.
The one thing I've written down is that we have at least three different avenues for team. You have a team for team scoring purposes, you have team for membership purposes, and you have team for maintaining membership is what I've heard so far. It's almost as if this definition needs to be delineated out in that manner. Like if team defined, team means the number of pupils that participate collectively or individually in the following sanctioned sports for a member school. There's 15, and it's going to be 16 with girls wrestling coming on. 16 of our sports can be individual participants achieving a state title. They're not a team. They don't qualify for that team, and it's almost as if we have to break it apart into almost like a flow. I hate to use the word flow chart, but a flow chart as to where team falls to help alleviate that problem. Because I agree with what Dave said. We've had members come in, they've produced the bare minimum, and then once they get that membership, they pull it away. But at the same time, what we don't want to do is we don't want to punish a school based on their enrollment numbers that don't have enough to field the programs. And that to me has now become one of my primary issues, is to make sure I fix that regulation so that it doesn't penalize schools that don't have control over such situations. And I think what Dave's talking about is more of a control situation where you're not necessarily trying because you don't want to. Whereas a school that has, 6 kids come in from the eighth grade, they're not going to field a football team. They're not going to field an 8-man football team with low numbers. So I'm very hesitant on how we. It's almost as if there has to be 3 subpoints to team from that purpose. And I don't know how you write that yet, but that's me. That's my 5 cents.
yeah,
Dave.
and that's what. Go ahead, Paul.
Oh, this is Paul Anderson, legal counsel. So one of the things I think we got to remain cognizant of is if we're adding this as a regulation, it would go into the first part of the NACs where there's multiple definitions of terms that are used throughout the body of the, all the regulations that make up the NIAA rules. So I agree. I mean, I don't know if we even want to have a definition, because whatever definition you put in there is going to have to apply to every place in the regulations where the word team exists. So if we want to make it specific to membership, then I think it needs to be something that we just put in a membership section of the regs. If we somehow want to make it applicable to everything, then it could go into the general definitions.
And I can tell you there's 431 times the word team is used in our regulations. So
That doesn't surprise me. So, yeah.
So I agree, Paul. And that's why I think in the beginning I said I think it might be better that we pull it out of the definition section and we focus on a regulation that delineates the different ways that team can affect you, right? In postseason versus in membership, gaining membership and maintaining membership. I think it might be more beneficial to kind of have subsections in a separate
Yeah.
not defined term, because that's not, I mean, we use it in a lot of different ways in our regulations, just from looking at a few of them, and it wouldn't even make sense, I don't think, to define it, because it's
Right. And if you start looking at the membership aspect of it, you have to also look at, was it the new realignment reg that was passed, where basically we're not going to allow a school to come in and have a boys sport and a girls sport in a certain particular sports for a season, and then change from season to season during a period of realignment. You know, we have all those restrictions too. So yeah, I don't know. I think that this might create more problems than it solves.
agreed. Anybody else, any other thoughts on this and direction?
Kate, this is Jay Schrader. I think it's defining team with the small schools is going to be very difficult. Because enrollment, I can just give you a case in point. Our enrollment for our high school is down 45 kids. That's a lot. Okay. And so, we're trying, the best you can do is, hopefully you have individuals that can compete, but obviously as team championships, they can't compete, as an individual. So I think I agree. We have to be careful of what we defined as a team. There are individual sports that kids can do, but you're not allowed to, that doesn't qualify you for a team aspect of for sure.
All right, so again, these are items that we have for discussion, but possible action. I will give an opportunity if anybody has a motion for this, that they want to move forward in any way, shape, or form with this. If not, if there's no motion, I really think we kind of go back to the drawing board and maybe draft up some other options for regulations revolving around team and membership and how they relate to one another, and bring that back to take another look and talk through some options there if there's no motion. So opening it up.
Okay,
Yeah.
this is Dave Henneman. Instead of saying the word team, what about if we say they need to have a sport? So it's not giving a complete number, so like a specific number on it. Say, hey, we have a sport, we have cross country. We don't have 5 runners, but at least we have 4. We're a small school. We're actually participating in the fall, because I know a lot of those smaller schools, they might not have that many boys, and just say, hey, we got 4 kids. So if we do have that sport, we don't have football, but we have cross country as a sport. So even though we're not going to qualify for a team championship, or at least participating in that sport.
Okay.
So that's just something to think about.
Anybody else? Any desire to move forward as this is, or any motion to do anything specific with this regulation at this time? Again, if not, then we'll go back to the drawing board and maybe draft up some other ideas to come back with. Good. Hearing none. All right, we're going to move on then to B, which is going through basically pages 6 through, there's several. These are all of the 200 to 216. These regulations are all the membership and association regulations that we currently have in place. So before you scroll, Tia, I'm just going to go kind of individually through them just to kind of give you the overview of each, and then we can kind of go briefly through these. This, again, I would say is just for discussion, just so we can kind of talk about them. Hopefully you had a chance to at least briefly look through them. But the goal here is to see if there's anything outdated, to see if there's anything that needs to be changed, updated, added, and then depending on what we do with team, or any changes that we want to make in regards to maintaining membership, because we really don't have anything outside of what Tim was talking about, a newer regulation that was just developed about, dropping teams that kind of affects in some ways your membership or could affect your membership. You don't really have anything on the books right now that requires once you gain your membership, you have to do X, Y, and Z to keep it. We don't have much of that right now. So we want to make sure, if that is a problem that we're starting to see, that we start to develop something concrete in our regulations to help protect that from happening, which is some of the stuff that Dave had brought up. So this first regulation, I'm just again going to kind of briefly go through these. This first regulation is just submitting your application for your membership. And so it goes over, as you can see, like the dates and things like that, and what the requirements are once you have applied. So adopting the regulations, having the annual dues, paying your dues, complying with the regulations. We have a separate part of this regulation for our affiliate schools. So those that are outside of Nevada that are allowed to apply. It does have some stipulations under 4 for those out of state, how they can join or apply. And it's based on a recommendation from a member school or from the membership itself, from a committee. We don't really have necessarily a committee appointed to inspect facilities. So I don't know if that's something we might want to look into possibly changing, or if that means that's us and we're technically that committee, because we kind of are overseeing the membership side of things. So that's something to maybe think about. And Paul, feel free to chime in at any point on any of these if you know like a reason for certain wording. And then it just kind of goes through the other specifications for, again, your out of state affiliate schools complying when they want to come in as an affiliate school. If you look at D, that's the big one where it really talks about the costs and how they can get approved. And it has to be through 2/3 of the schools that they're assigned to in that league or class being, in support of that situation, their fee there. And that's basically it. So the second half of that regulation is really talking more about affiliates entering in, and then the others are for any public school. Any questions on that or things that you see that are big issues? Any discussion about this particular regulation? And again, we can come back to these. I just want to get them kind of in front of you too to start.
Hey, Kate, this is Doug from CCSD. One of the concerns that 2 schools have reached out to us regarding the conditions of their facilities. We've gotten 2 issues about democracy prep in their football field. So I do think that's something that, moving forward, that maybe we need to either, whether it's us as a committee or develop a committee that goes out and looks at these facilities. One of the pictures I saw, there's drainage grates literally about 3 feet, maybe a little more, a little less, off the sidelines of the football field. That's a safety hazard. So, I just wanted to put my 2 cents in when it comes to the facilities and making sure that they're playable for schools that are coming in.
Thanks, Eddie. And what I can kind of say, regarding this particular regulation, this is your submission of your application to join. And though we don't have a committee, I do have it, and we'll get to it later. I do have like a checklist of what I look for when I personally go out to the facility and making sure that, they're, for them to come into our association, do they have the minimum? Is it safe? All of those things. So that's going to be done several times before they even are granted full membership. So for instance, American Heritage, they have been now approved by the board to come into the association, but prior to that, they've had facilities checked. And I kind of presented on that and in my findings of that. So this might be kind of a point to making a new regulation or adding to our regulations about maintaining your membership. So let's say in the beginning, I don't know what that process was for democracy prep when they first came in, but let's say that everything did look good initially, and that's why they were accepted into the membership. But now over the years, maybe they now had to move to this facility because they can't do it on campus. And now that's where those safety concerns are coming in. I think that goes back to our whole maintaining membership piece that we're kind of missing, that I think it's important we have something in our regulations that says to maintain, you either have like, yearly, we're going around and checking all the different facilities that we have before postseason, we're checking something like that. So I do think that, or maybe it's only when a concern comes up, right? there's a concern about a facility. Now we need to go take a check and look at that. And if they can't fix it, maybe that does affect their membership. So I think that's a great point and something that is missing that we need to find a way to integrate into our regulations. So that's a good point. Anybody else on that or anything with this particular regulation? So again, this is for applying to become a member school.
Hey, Kate, if you need somebody to go to schools, that's something I'm willing to do. If you guys come up with a list of places, I'm happy to go out to the places if you need somebody to do that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, Kate, I agree. I think we need a way to be able to make sure the facilities are safe, number one. And I don't think we can go out and check all the facilities, that
Right.
everybody's got, but certainly those that raise concerns need to be checked.
Right. So yeah, even if there's something in our regulation that say, if a concern from a member school is presented, a committee will go out or an individual from the NIAA staff will go out and check those facilities. So I think those are all really great points. I think there's definitely some room for us to improve in this area and get people out there to make sure we have safety, obviously number one first, but also just able to host and things like that.
Kate, this is Paul Anderson. I think all of these regulations dealing with membership, if you look at down at the bottom, it kind of shows the history of when they were last revised. It was in June of 2014. What we had going on back then was we had the issues with Clark County School District and Gorman. There was a feeling that Gorman shouldn't be competing at all with Nevada schools, and then Clark County was looking at potentially pulling all their schools out of the association. And we revised these regulations at that time. We also had the situation with Findlay Prep, and that was, I think, what this limited membership. Anyway, I think all these probably need to be updated to a certain extent. For instance, we've changed the the fee schedule and that sort of thing. So that at least has to be changed. And then I don't know if maybe obviously the public schools are, that their membership application is one thing, private schools another, and then we just got to look at these other ones that we got into, because we really we were getting into the weeds and developing certain regulations that were applicable to maybe one or two schools at that time.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's kind of why I just wanted to put them all out here for us to get our eyes on, and then there may be, a need to pare it down or drastically change them if need be, but wanted to just try to get some conversation around it to see where we think some of those changes should be. If there's no other questions or comments on this one, we'll move to the next one. Again, this is all just for discussion. No, we're not doing anything yet with these, but any valuable input that you guys have on any of these is appreciated. So this next one is, now we're looking, because the previous is really about our public schools and how they can join. And then this regulation is about private schools. So I think the first thing obviously is we don't have anything about membership for charter schools. And that's mostly because there were no public charter schools at the time that this was created and then revised. I don't believe there were many or any that were trying to join. So I think first and foremost, that would be one thing we would want to update here, is the language to include charter schools. That was one thing I noted. And really, when we're going through this, it's talking about enrollment size. So again, Paul,
Some of that, Kate, tied back into the old realignment rules,
right,
in terms of new schools coming in and how they would go on an independent status, like subsection 3 there and all that. So yeah, all this needs to be substantially revised again.
Yeah, because I'm even looking at 500 pupils. So if we have a private school over 500 pupils, they have no way into the membership, basically, by our regulations.
Right. That restriction's got to be removed. Yeah.
So there's just little things like that again, I just think we kind of talk through some of these outdated pieces and we adjust and we can come back at later meetings and kind of revise and go through this all, but just other things that you're looking at through this. Again, please just point out if you see anything else that's kind of glaring here. So that's one of the things there, that 500 pupils would probably need to come out. Let's see what else is here. So we have some dates about when they're placed in, their independent status, that we are, checking. And this stuff, some of the stuff is still valid, checking the facilities, checking the extent that they've complied with their schedule, and all the regulations. Like, we still look at all those things before we allow a member school to kind of come in. So I think some of that's okay. And then the rest of this is really just talking about the written request for membership and all that process, which again, most of that is pretty good. There might just need to be some small updates in there. Anybody have anything else on this particular regulation? So again, I think the main thing is changing it to involve our charter schools and removing some of the restrictions on size and things like that. But other thoughts on this particular regulation? All right. If there's nothing else, we will move on to the next one. So 204. This is for, I apologize, 204 and 206. I tried to separate these each to be on their own page, and I must have missed this. So there's two regulations here, but that first one, that small one at the top, provisional membership is going to be for like our Spring Mountains and Independence High School. So those schools,
It just applies to those two.
That's it
Yeah.
right now.
Yep.
So I don't necessarily think there needs to be, I don't see anything glaring here. I don't know, Paul, if you want to chime in anything that needs to be changed here. That's been in place for quite some time, and
yeah, that's always just applied to those types of schools. So and there's just the two of them, I believe.
I think so too. Okay. If anybody has anything to say about that, or opinions or changes that you see necessary, chime in. If not, we can move to 206. Not hearing anything. Okay, 206. So 206 is to become an associate member. Any high school can apply, for associate membership. Kind of goes through the timeline for that, which again may need to be adjusted possibly. And this kind of goes through what needs to be signed and by who. So essentially, this is now your application to fully come in as an associate member, and then eventually get your full membership. So the associate membership is something also that I have on our agenda to talk about, because we don't have a definition for that, like what that exactly means. But essentially, that's your probationary period before you are granted full membership. And if you go through this process and we check out your facilities and your scheduling and you're doing well in all of those aspects, then there's a good chance, if the membership and the board are good with it, that you'll be approved. So that's really what this is about, is just the application process to get that into that like provisional time to become an associate member. So again, something that we might want to look at as far as having a definition, or maybe even further explaining what it means to be an associate member and what is required there. Because I don't know that it's necessarily explicitly stated anywhere in the regulations regarding that definition and what that means. So any thoughts on this one? It's pretty straightforward. It just might need some more meat to it.
Yeah, Kate, the only thing I would probably change there is ask them about charter schools, because I know charter schools aren't like a superintendent.
Okay, so when it goes down, if you look, you're right. If the applicant is a private school and then it has those stipulations, so what are your suggestions on there? Like what verbiage makes the most sense for charter schools in that sense? Because you're right.
I would say like the principal or other person that's in charge of the school, and then the administrative head, I know some charter schools, like there's a bunch of us here that are part of Academica, and we could have the head of Academica do that. Or state charter authority, they have to, I don't know, trying to get like signatures to the state charter authority
Might
saying
be
that
tough.
they are a charter school. Yeah.
So instead of the governing body of the school for 3, it would basically be similar to private, but we could just include state charter authority instead, you think?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else, others? Okay, all right, let's move on to the next. All right, so 208, it would be the approval process for becoming an associate member. Basically just walks through those steps. Again, adopting the regulations, paying fees, complying with the regulations, making sure it's not gonna, compromise the competitive balance and integrity of the league. Once they are, and then it goes into 2, once you're granted your associate membership, you have a possible restricted schedule. Again, some of that language, I don't know, Paul, if that would need to be updated. Is it really restricted once they're an associate member?
Yeah,
Not really sure.
I always thought that once they be, I haven't looked at these in a long time, but yeah, we probably need to update these to just be more in line with what we're doing now.
Yeah, because I mean, once they're in, they're just, an associate member. They're attempting to have the same type of schedule that anybody else would, so they're restricted by, contest limits. But other than that, I don't know what that intent would be, what the restricted part of that meant. But that might need to be looked at.
Mhm.
Obviously, we know they can't compete in a state championship, and we're not applying for other types of memberships at the same time. So I think those kind of make sense. And 3, if board grants the associate membership, again, I don't know that the board is really determining the number of games and contests that they may participate in. I don't know that that's accurate anymore. I think it just is based on normal game limits. So again, something we might want to look at that part of this regulation. But this is essentially just saying 206 was applying, and then 208 is once you are granted your associate membership. So this is probably the one to me that seems the closest to defining what it means to be an associate member. It's telling you what you can and can't do as an associate member. So again, I just think maybe there's some beefing up of this regulation to define it out a little bit further as to exactly what you have to do, how long you're in this, period of associate membership, and maybe the process of what's going on, which again, you'll see a little bit later on in some of the documentation I have in the packet on that process for associate membership. So maybe some of that gets added into the regulation if we see fit.
Hey, Kate,
Yes.
this is also where the confusion comes in for a lot of people, because when you're an associate member, you're also on independent status.
Right.
And so, but we also have schools that are on independent status that are full members.
Right.
So I think that clearing up that, understand what that means. Are they a +1? Are they not the +1? Can we play them? Can we not play them? Are they in the league? No, they're not. But sometimes the league has a hole in it, so they just drop them in. I mean, I can tell you that I want to tell you it was Sloan Canyon filled the vacancy in a league. I just stuck them in there because it was just easy to get them the full games. So I think that might be a little clarifying, because that question gets asked a lot. Are they associate? Are they independent? Are they +1? Whatever. I think that would help. That this reg right here might need to be cleaned up so that we can make sure they understand the difference there.
Yeah, and I think in kind of going along that, I don't believe there's anything in our regulations that talk about like our whole concept of permission to play before they even become an associate member, and the difference with that. So I don't know if that's also something, along the lines of the process that needs to maybe be more explicit in there, because I think that's some of the confusion too, is when we give permission to play before they've even been approved as an associate member. What does that mean, and how does that relate to game limits and all of those things? So that could also be something that we need to look at adding, something about just more details on the process of becoming a member. which I think, like I said, you'll see in the documents I have later on, we have it kind of written out. It's just not part of the regulation. So I think that all needs to kind of match. Okay, anything else with 208? All right, let's go ahead and move to 210. All right, so this one, and Paul, you can chime in if you want. This one is a very specific situation that Paul kind of brought up earlier with Findlay Prep. So I don't know where we need to go. Go ahead, Paul. I'll let you talk on this.
I guess we could, it's probably a wise idea to keep something like this or something similar in, but this rig was developed exclusively for Findlay Prep when they were active in the state. They were coming to the NIAA board every year in the fall to get a waiver, to have basically a membership so they could play anybody anywhere in the United States that was also a member of an association. And so they were always very good, from the standpoint of complying with what the board requested, and we placed the annual application fee there. You'll see on 2B of $5,000, and they willingly would pay that. But they're not here anymore, and this really doesn't apply to any team or school within the association anymore. But it doesn't mean that something like this may not come to be again somewhere down the line. So it's probably worth keeping, just from that standpoint, that if there was some unique situation that fit into this type of concept again, and the board was interested in pursuing it, then you'd have an avenue to do so. But otherwise, this is really kind of irrelevant at this time.
Yeah, I mean, I would just suggest in the sense that we keep it as is and then adjust it to when and if somebody else comes around, because obviously it was created very specifically for them. So maybe we adjust it if somebody comes down the road. So I agree with that. Not much here that we would need to do since it doesn't really apply right now. Anybody else on this? All right, let's go to 212. Okay, so this is one Paul mentioned that, our fee schedule, this has actually been updated. So was it updated in the regulation or just approved? I remember it being approved by the board and we've made that adjustment. Tim or Paul, I'm not
I don't think the regulation changed, so we need to change it to comply with what the board's done.
Okay. So obviously we're looking at, a change there for amounts. But this is basically just our, membership dues regulation. So we'll look at this and make sure that it complies with what we've recently changed. The special assessment, do we know what that is regarding? Any special assessment imposed against a school, 20% of annual dues. Is that like a special fine? I'm not really sure what that even was initially intended for.
I think that was placed in there primarily for, an emergency situation if something were to occur. Some of the other associations in the state or in the country have provisions like this, where if there's, a situation that arises that where the association is going to be depleted of funds in order to continue the association, there's an ability to make a one-time assessment or an assessment at that point in time to the various schools in order to generate capital to operate.
Makes
So we
sense.
can't raise it to 1,000% then, can we, Paul?
Dang.
You can do whatever the member schools approve, right?
100%. Right. So this one, it looks like we'll just make some changes here for the updated amounts. Anything else with 12? All right. Move on to 214. We just have 2 left. So this relates to pulling out of the membership, and then also on the flip end, anybody that is trying to get reinstated in the membership. So lots there regarding just kind of the process for that. So again, I'm not sure if there needs to be any updates here, if there's, any need to really change this process if we see fit. But it really walks step by step through what that would look like. And I don't know, we've had this happen obviously in the past. So I'm
This,
assuming that was,
Kate, this,
Go
this
ahead,
is
Paul.
the one that goes back to what I talked about initially, and that was when there was a lot of turmoil going on between Bishop Gorman and the Clark County schools, and certain, threats for schools that were going to pull out of the association and whatnot. So that's when I believe this regulation was developed, just to deal with that situation that never really came to be.
that makes sense. I think it's obviously important to still have it in case schools decide they want to do that for any reason. Anything else on this? If anybody had any feedback on the drawing reinstatement? Okay. All right, we'll move to 216. This is the last one. This is where, we could revoke a membership, well, we meaning Tim, could revoke a membership of an affiliate school. And so I think this is also one where we may want to beef this up a little bit regarding some of the things that we've been discussing with facility issues or not maintaining their full membership. I know Tim has been talking about a regulation, which again is a little bit further here in the packet, that was created about, not fielding the appropriate teams that are required, things like that. So I don't know if we want to have that, that regulation is pretty much separate from this. So maybe we keep this as is and just say, we can also do this based on these regulations, this regulation versus the one Tim's talking about, which is if you're not fielding the teams, but there might be a need to look at all of those collectively to say what are the different ways that your membership could be in jeopardy, and does that need to all be one regulation or separated out? But this is really very basic in the terms of it's just saying, if a member school recommends it and it's approved by 2/3 of your class or league, and the board approves it as well, we can pull the membership. So thoughts on that one? Tim, what do you think on this one regarding just it being separated out? Because it's kind of just separate in the sense that it's not giving a reason why. It's just saying if people want you to be out.
I think the key here is the word affiliate. I think these are like our needles.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is the affiliates. Yes, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. No, I think that's what these are. These are the schools that don't reside within our state border.
Correct. The regulation we're talking about later is the one that now we're talking about ways that we can pull that membership. You're right.
So I think this is one that if the association ever got sideways with, Truckee, I think that's the best example, or needles.
So until we have that regulation that we're working on the books, we actually don't have a regulation to remove any member school outside of our affiliate schools. So just a thought, and I think that's part of a lot of the conversation.
We don't have a regulation that would allow for immediate removal, but we have the ability to sanction schools for violating rules. And, if that gets to a point where it's significant or in a lot of different areas, then, there's action can be taken by the executive director regarding the membership of the school, I think, just under our general appeal and complaint procedures in the regulations.
Yep, I do think that it's in there regarding sanctioning and all that. So, all right. So anything else with just the general membership regulations that we reviewed? Any other comments on any of those regulations? Good. Okay, so before we kind of get away from that membership, I'm just going to make the suggestion that, we as a staff and then anybody else that wants to kind of have any input outside of this meeting to provide any feedback for us to come back with some updates and changes to any of these that, things that might be out of date, as well as possibly looking at adding some language regarding how we maintain membership because we really don't have anything like that. And working with the regulation that we currently already have about, dropping programs and how that affects membership, and just making sure we have kind of a complete picture of what it means to first become a member and then to maintain that status, I think is important. So that's really what I think our goals are, kind of moving forward with those. Anybody else have anything? Okay. So C and D of the same point, I don't have any page for that in here, but again, I just kind of put a thought there for C and D, just as new definition for associate member, and then D is new regulation regarding maintaining membership, which is basically what I just said is the two areas I think we really should focus on if we need to beef up any of regulation that has to do with the associate membership and that definition, since it's not really super explicit in the regulation. And then if we see a need to define out or work on adding some language for maintaining the membership. So that's my suggestion. I would entertain any conversation about either of those two things, how you feel about those, or thoughts and ideas. And if not, we can come back at a later meeting and really start to maybe develop those if we feel like it's necessary. Any thoughts on definitions for associate member, new regulation regarding maintaining membership?
Michael Strong, Browning Valley. I like the idea of having the maintaining membership status, having something in there. As we've talked about today, that you do get a lot of members that do get put in and then don't fulfill those requirements. So I don't think that hurts at all.
Awesome. Thank you. Others? Anybody else? All right. If there is nothing else, we will move on to item 6, which is reviewing our current membership forms. Again, this is for now just for discussion, but definitely something moving into next school year that we would like to make changes and have available for the next school year. So we have 2 documents here regarding membership. The first is the new membership application. So this is what is completed by a school that is looking to become an associate and then full member eventually. And this is used for both of those instances. So initially, when you first want to come in, you're going to complete this. And then when you are applying for your full membership, you're going to complete it again going into that school year so that we have your accurate numbers and all of that going into the year that you will hopefully become a member. So we definitely want a lot of our documents to be digital. I don't know that this one should be digital in the fact that it needs to be signed off by all of those entities. So I don't know if that's a possibility or something we really want to look at. This might be one that we do keep hard copy just for that, because again, if you remember going through that regulation where Dave was giving, the different signatures for charter schools, that's, an actual signature from all of those individuals. So I don't know that digital would be best for this. That being said, still a possibility if we think there's a way of doing that. But what I really want to do is just look through the pages of this to see if there's some areas that need to be updated. I can always update, the look of it if we feel that's necessary, the flow. But essentially this first part is just going over, what you're agreeing to by applying to be a member school. Your count day numbers. Page 2 of this document goes over what you are planning to field coming into the membership as an associate member. So for those first couple of years. And then the next page is just kind of signing off that I understand that somebody's going to come and look at the facility. I got to abide by all the regulations, and you will kind of be placed in a sense while you're an associate member with the different schools that are within your classification, based on your size. And then all those signatures, as we've talked about here. It has a little bit about the timeline there, which doesn't necessarily line up exactly with what our regulation says. So I think that's something we need to look at, whether we change the regulation dates or we change, these dates. But that seems to have been the precedent since before I've been in the office with the dates. So I just want to take a look at that. And there's just a little caveat there for Clark County and Washoe. If it's a public school within one of those zones, one of those school districts, it will go to those offices first, because they're the ones that would be kind of having all that information about the public school in their district that would be joining the membership. So just opening that up for ideas, thoughts, changes. What do we like about it? What do we not like about it? I will make any changes we see fit and kind of bring that back to look at. So feel free to chime in with anything you see.
Kate, you know my feelings. I just
So
visually.
what do you suggest? If it's something that we need signed off by those entities, how are we making this digital?
No, I don't think we can. I think you're correct
Yeah.
on that. I do think what we could do though is the last page could be a sign off sheet and not the whole packet. So
Okay.
Something of that nature. I'm a big one for the visual. You know how I am. It makes me edgy.
A lot of different fonts, colors, sizes. I mean, I can pretty it up.
Yeah,
I can definitely do that.
I hate the word pretty it up, but you know what I'm talking about. But I would like to see maybe we could get it to the point where we're only having them print out one page. Everything else, I mean, there's a way to do this electronically where when you hit that submit, it pulls up that page and then they have to print that out and have it signed. So we're dealing with one sheet of paper and then this is all online available.
Perfect.
But I'll be glad to work with you on that as well.
Yep.
That's my big thing for this. I want to try to get this done and then I'll end on that one.
Okay. Any other thoughts about any of this? Good. All right. Let's move on to the renewal. So this is what you all complete every year. And this, I definitely think we can move to electronic. I don't think this needs to be a hard copy completion. Again, there are, the signatures of the principal that we would possibly have to figure out if we want to keep that as part of it. But a lot of this, I think, can be done digitally, kind of in the same fashion as Mr. Jackson just went over. Thoughts on the form? You guys fill it out every year, so you guys have the most, input on this since it's something you have to complete. So you let us know if this needs to be updated. I have one thing I'm going to say about the last page, but first just on the 3 pages, not this last document here. Any other thoughts? Do we like the idea of electronic? Mostly, I think that helps a lot of people just getting it done electronically.
Hey, this is Paul. Again, I'll just chime in. From my standpoint as legal counsel, and I think this is a big deal. Page 18, which I think is the second page of the renewal form, which has all the stipulations, the bullet points in there as to what a school agrees to when they renew their membership. It's important to keep that.
Yep.
Just from the standpoint of when we have disputes, it's always nice to be able to pull this out and show it to the school that's complaining about whatever it is we're doing.
Agreed, definitely. Yeah, if we went electronic with this, I think these would all be individual. Yes, I agree to, a part of that application. So they would have to still essentially sign off on that either way. All right, if you would scroll please, Tia, to 20. So this was actually created in the Clark County School District. I shared it with Lori last year to add to this because she felt it was nice and organized for you guys to be able to fill in your dates. I think the issue with that is there might be schools that don't have quarter bases. I don't know. I just want to make sure that this actually relates to every school in our membership, because I know some don't have quarters. Some might have trimesters. Some schools may just do the 2 semesters for their official grading period. I just want to make sure it actually fits everybody's needs and it doesn't need to be adjusted at all. So I would just kind of want your feedback for your schools. Was this good? Did it help you? Did it make it easier to just fill in those dates? And then has all those, check procedures down there to assist you with understanding traditional versus non-traditional. Just want to know how we felt about this, since I think this was the first year that you used this, or maybe last year was. So yeah, just looking for some feedback on this piece.
I personally liked it. Made it a little more organized for me.
Yeah, Kate, I liked it a lot. I got it right on my wall next to me, and that's how we use it extensively, and it's a great guide for us.
Anybody else? Any issues with
Okay.
it?
So I know with our school and a lot of our charter schools, we don't go by quarters, we go by semester grades. And I know like when you go backwards and stuff, it was we have one period in there where it's like it doesn't line up because we have 1 week longer in the second semester than we do in the first. I don't know how that worked out, but just looking at our schedule, like at end of our like third, we do like quarters, first quarter, second quarter, but our grades go for the entire semester, and so we basically when we turned it in, we actually have like a 4 week block instead of a 3 week block.
Yeah, and I
That's
know I
between
worked with
like the winter and spring sports, so it doesn't really
Okay.
affect much.
Yeah, and I know I had to work with a bunch of schools in the beginning of the year when I was going over putting their dates in here. And I think a lot of people are unaware of how to do it in regards to the grade checks has to be 15 days before the end of a quarter semester, whatever grading period, has to be 15 days into a grading period. And I think that also caused some issues. And that's not explicitly put anywhere in our application for, how you actually develop these dates, since it has changed with the academic eligibility changes. So that would be one thing I'm just kind of thinking maybe it would help to have instructions or something more specific to how you actually set up those dates for, I don't know, in the quarters. I think the quarters kind of mess you up too, but it does say you have to have 2 checks for each grading period. And if you're not really grading period by quarters, that means you only have to have 2 per semester, but that wouldn't, make sense based on every 3 weeks. I think it's a little bit more complex. It's not the same for everybody. Obviously, our big schools like Clark County, they, one is done for the whole district, so that's nice. But all of our other schools start at different times. I think that, affects some things too. So I don't know, just looking if there's things we need to kind of change in here to help make this make more sense. Maybe the quarters out of there. I'll brainstorm some ideas, but just wanted to get some feedback on how you guys felt about it and if it helped or was making it more difficult. Anybody else? Any other thoughts on that? All right. If not, let's move on to item 21, which is item 7, which is on page 21. So this was something that was created as a draft. Nobody has seen this yet. It was just an internal document that was being worked on that I just wanted to share to kind of see how you guys felt about it, because I think this would really help as a new member if you're trying to get into the association, help you understand the process. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, some of this, if it's not exactly lining up with our regulations, then we should kind of make sure that those adjustments are made either in the regulation or if they're made on this document. But I think this would be helpful to have to share with those new schools so that they understand what that process is. So really, it's just breaking down the process. You have to apply by this date, which is on our forms. During that time of you applying and going into whatever meeting that you will be possibly approved as an associate member for the following year, there's site inspections, meetings, then the winter board meeting. It could be at a later time. It doesn't have to be the winter board meeting, but if you apply by that deadline, that's the earliest it could be. That's when, we'll present to the board about you becoming an associate member for the following school year. And then the next part is really that process and what it means to be an associate member. So you're doing, the student registration, the coaches education and final forms, you're doing, activate off-site visits, they'll continue, obviously scheduling against the member schools, having a boys and girls team for a minimum of 2 consecutive years, seasons, can't play in the postseason. And then you complete this end of year associate member score report that we have so that we can see, your numbers and what you actually were able to do during that time. So I think some of this is what's missing from our regulation that maybe it's important to have in there so that they understand. And maybe it's not as explicit as the activate piece and the final forms piece, because that could just be you're following the same regulations and the same expectations of other schools. But I think that would maybe be important to take a look at the regulations and make sure that we're kind of covering all that in there. I don't believe that there's anything regarding the minimum 2 years. And I think that kind of goes along with the realignment cycle. So maybe it's inherent, but I don't know if we need to add that or not, just some things to think about. And then the last piece there is for your full membership going into a realignment year, which is what we just did for American Heritage. You have to complete that membership application again. We present it. If you get approved, that begins the next school year going into that realignment cycle. So just a draft document to kind of help those new schools looking for any feedback or anything that may be needed to add, or how we feel about that.
Kate, John Glover, Eureka High School. Just a quick question about the 2-year piece. If it falls on not with realignment, does that pose problems for league schools, things like that? So that the associate member, if they come in the first year of realignment, and I know realignment's now 3 years, but if that doesn't match up, does that pose a problem for schools and leagues? Just a thought.
So I think the purpose of it saying the minimum 2 years is because at the minimum, if you enter at the beginning of a realignment cycle, a typical one outside of this 3-year one, right? If you enter at the beginning, then you will be up and able to apply fully for that next cycle. So you only have to do 2 years. However, if you do apply in the middle of a cycle, then you got to get through that one and 2 more. So it's a minimum of 3 years for that person because they're coming in the middle of a cycle. So does that answer your question? What you're kind of asking?
You. Yeah, I appreciate
Yep.
that.
Yeah, so that's why the minimum's there.
Also, Kate, this also brings up the interesting situation we had with American Heritage. Their cycle is not up, but we had to approve them based on whether they would complete the cycle because we have to align them so that we don't run into that league problem in the fall. So American Heritage's membership was brought forth at the last board meeting with the caveat put on that they have to complete the winter and the spring so that next fall they can be aligned, because we're already starting to align fall right now. So that's a great question because we got to make sure we always have those lined up. Also, we don't want to get into a situation where we had with what was it called? It wasn't Amplis. It was what Amplis was before it was Amplis. They got into a cycle where they were going through the process for multiple years because we didn't have everything lined up and they just kept falling into cracks that just shouldn't have existed. So this helps clean that up as well.
Yeah, and I think we're cognizant of that. And we make sure, like with American Heritage, we knew that they technically hadn't completed, but we're saying you're approved if you can complete this. And that way we're not running into those league errors and issues, having to realign again once they're in at a later time. So good question. Anything else on this document? And any changes that we see, and if not, I'll take a second look at it, make sure it looks good to go. If not, then I'll bring it back to a future meeting for action if we feel this is something that we want to put out to, the public on our website so that those wanting to join the association have this information, or maybe we keep it internal. And then if somebody applies, we provide it to them so they understand the process. We can kind of talk about that if we decide that we want to take any action on this and make this an official document for the NIAA. All right, we'll go ahead and move to item 8, which is another draft document. So this is really explaining and kind of combining this with the definition piece before, explaining what associate membership means in a little bit more detail than what we currently have in the regulations. So for this, again, this could be something that we just share as a document with those that are associate members that get approved. Here's everything. It's something we could have on our website. It could be something that we look at to add to part of our regulations. So really looking for feedback on this, just to kind of go through it. Once you're approved for your associate membership, so that's that kind of provisional period, you have to comply by the rules. So some of that is in the regulation. You're on independent status and you're not able to compete for postseason, paying your annual dues. You can start scheduling with the member schools due to that independent status. Like I said, you could also be exempt from one contest for your opponents. So again, that's something that's not really in the regulations per se. And you're not required to be in the league scheduling, but like Tim said, sometimes it's easier to plug them in for reasons of making that all kind of even out. You are assigned a classification and region just for more of the administrative purposes and the scheduling piece and helping out with that. Begins competition as an associate member of the following school year. So yeah, once you're approved, it goes to it's not immediate. So it's for the next school year as begins your year one as an associate member. We're again bringing up the 2 years minimum. At the conclusion of that, you can apply for, whatever membership applies to your situation, whether you're affiliate outside of the state of Nevada, provisional for those schools that have the students that are awarded the court. And some of the considerations for admission are listed there. So we get, and this is if you watch the board meeting, kind of these are kind of the steps that I went through for American Heritage. I got feedback from the schools regarding them fulfilling their schedules, being in compliance, adequacy of the facilities. I went there and saw it. I talked to people that have played against them, looking at all those things, competitive areas, or competition areas, locker room, spectator area, all of that. Just getting general input about their involvement in any, league matters. And I included any information that would be forwarded to us regarding, their participation as a member school. So I just think this is a nice document to share as an associate school, so you know exactly what's expected of you and what that process is through those 2 years that you're an associate member. So looking for feedback, questions, comments, where we feel
This is
we
Paul
should
again.
kind of move.
I think both this and the document that you had, the timeline document that was the previous document. I think the more information we can provide those schools, the better. And it doesn't hurt to have as much information as we can, because a lot of these schools coming in don't have any idea as to how things work within the NIAA. And so that to me is real, important. It avoids confusion and potential issues down the line with them. So I think it's a good job that you've done on those.
I won't take credit. It was not me who created them, but I want to bring them forward so that we can kind of move forward with them, because I do think they're great documents, and I think that it would be very helpful for those two schools. Paul, on a regulation standpoint, I mean, do you feel that it would benefit us to have a little bit more detail about what it means to be an associate member inside the regulations, or is something like this okay to then just say, here's what you need to do?
I think something that explains things in plain terms is a better thing for a handout. I mean, the regulation says what it says, and then I think, you explain it well in here, in non legalese, which is easier for people to understand and to work with. So I think it's just better to go with something like this.
Hey,
Yeah. Hey, Rollins.
the presentation that you made to the board of with the assistance of a school being voted on as a member at our last meeting. You know what I'm talking about? The packet that was delivered with the pictures of their facilities and
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. The report. Yep.
Yeah. Did you do that?
Yeah.
And you did it all. You took the pictures, you did everything else like that.
Yeah.
Is there a way then that we could could come up with a fictitious school and come up with that type of a rubric or a form or a document that once these schools want to become an associate member and meet those qualifications, that they could see that rubric or see what an approved school kind of looks like and provides, and come up with a fictitious name and all of that, because I really think that that would be very, very helpful for schools that are coming in to see, wow, this is what a new school is coming to the table. Because I think some of these schools, and this doesn't happen in our area that much, but in your area, this happens a lot. And I really don't think that those schools that are applying for this kind of status really truly understands what it means to have a facility, and this is what the facility should look like, and this is what we are kind of requesting that you to have, because I don't think they get it. I think that in the past I've seen them say, oh man, they let this school in, we should be able to get in too, and just fill out the applications with nothing else to go with it, and thinking that that's okay.
Yeah, definitely. I think a template of some sort or an example for them to look at would be good. And then the very next thing I have on the list is a checklist for facilities. So that might be this is basically what I used when I went to American Heritage. So my other thought with what you were saying, it kind of just sparked that in me, is to say maybe they get that checklist when you become an associate member or when you're applying. Here's a checklist of basically, if you have these facilities and you want to participate in these sports, here are some of the things we're going to be looking for. So that gives them those 2 years as an associate member to kind of build up their facilities to meet those requirements. And they know what we're going to be looking for and what we're going to sign off on before we go and present them to the board in 2 years. So,
Exactly.
yeah,
Thank you.
good point. Yeah. Anything else on this document? All right, move on here. So like I was mentioning, item 9 here is the site inspection checklist. So basically, this is just my very rough draft of what I did when I went to American Heritage and what I'll do. I go to Civica in a couple weeks. I'm going to do the same thing there. This is their initial before they're even becoming an associate member. I've walked through, I list their sports so I know what I'm looking for, because if they're not offering that sport, I'm not necessarily looking for that if they don't have that facility. But first on the facility end, I just, look at their locker rooms, look at the equivalency of them to make sure, our girls' locker room is not a closet and the boys isn't some, 5-star hotel looking area. And then the gym, and I break it down by, how many gyms do they have? How many, how many people can be there, occupancy, bleacher capacity, all that. So I kind of list out, and then also looking at the specific equipment for the different sports that would be played in a gym. Then I go down to, if they have a football field, what we're looking for there. They don't have it, obviously, and they want to play football. Okay, we're going to run into some issues here. Where are we playing football? Where are we practicing? And then if you keep scrolling, Tia, keep going down a little bit. Then I go into soccer field, baseball field, and softball field. Again, just looking for the different areas and that they have that they may be playing sports in, and what they look like and what they have to offer. And then obviously if there's other things, I can add this, I just take notes all over this, and that's how I created my report. And then if you scroll to the last page, we got tennis court as well. And then I have a whole section for hosting games. So not only do their facilities need to be up to par, but they need to be able to host the games. And so are you currently selling tickets? Do you have the ability? Is there a secured, entry point for paid events? Do you have security plans? What's your process for ensuring those opposing teams can come in and have space for themselves? Officials, who's greeting them? What's your process for the officials? Do you have a trainer on site? Emergency action plan? All of these items. Parking is something you don't even really think about sometimes, but if you don't have adequate parking for, a final regional championship competition where there's going to be a ton of people and it's a football game, that's going to be an issue. So all of these little things are important. And I think, to Roland's point, you don't know unless you know. Like, you don't know unless someone tells you. So maybe having this be front loaded as, here's the checklist that I will be coming to your facility with. You need to have all of these things if you're going to be hosting this or that. or else it's going to be hard for you to get approved because that's what we're looking for to be, a member of the association. I think it's important. So really what I was looking for on this is if I missed anything, if there are certain areas that you felt, need additional points to be looking at. I really, again, you are the ones that are out there on a day-to-day basis at other people's facilities, and you know what's missing and you know what's needed. So if there's anything that you don't see on this list as you reviewed it, I would love to add it. The more the better, honestly. And even if it's not something that's required, but it just may be something that would be good to know if they have, we can add it to the list as, it doesn't have to be required. It can just be optional things that we add as well. So looking for any feedback as you reviewed this from this document.
Hey, Dave Edelman. One thing, it actually just came up yesterday. We're watching film of it, the poem we have coming up on Friday. Yes, we are playing on Friday. We noticed that they have goalposts on both sides, but every time a touchdown was scored on one end, they went to the other end to kick the extra point. And so we're going to reach out and say, why is that? Because we're playing at their place on Friday. Is there a certain reason why they do that? But we know that could alter a game, whether if, we were just talking about what it's windy, or if you're trying to attempt a field goal, like why are they not using that side to kick extra points or field goals? So like play clock and time and everything like that. So that's just one thing that just came up just yesterday as we're watching a film of a game. So sometimes like, hey, they look like they have the facilities, but why aren't they using the facilities that they have?
Yep. And I could say same thing kind of came up with looking at a school. They had scoreboards, but then I hear from member schools that, well, they rolled in portable scoreboards. They didn't use those ones. So it's like, oh, are they actually functioning? So it's not just asking the questions of, oh, you have a scoreboard, but is it working? Are the lights on? Do you use it? Do you have the panel to actually use that one? So I think some of that also just comes into the questioning as we go into these facilities, but also that it's not just, do you have it? Is it functioning? Do you use it? That's a great point.
So Kate, that kind of ties into the question I was going to ask. So if when they fill out their application and they state that they change locations from year to year, say like they had access to a certain park, but now they lost that access, is a member from the NIA going back out and reevaluating that facility that upcoming year since it's a new property?
Right. And I don't know that process has been happening, but that's definitely something that needs to happen. And we talked about that at length at the board of control meeting, is that the facilities are a huge issue, especially the ones that are not on your site. You're using parks. And I think that's big. And I don't know, maybe something in their renewal form each year needs to say, have you changed facilities at all? It has something, or it has something drastically changed in your facility. Maybe, we just redid our gym, or, those type of things. We don't really know it at the NIA level until we hear it from a member school. It's like, oh, we just went to a new park. That's not where they played last year. So maybe something in that renewal form needs to specify that facilities have changed, or we're using a new park, or whatever the case is, so that we can go out and we know that that's changed and we need to go take a look at it. So I agree with that for sure.
Hey, Kate, we have Doug on here right now. Doug can attest to this. When they went through the rehab at Centennial, that changed their status dramatically because they were not able to host at home. So that information being shared is very vital as a full member. So as you're going through, I think that's a key point though, as we go through the membership process for new members, the status of their facility or the facilities they're using and the updated access to those facilities are key, because you might have access to a very nice park the first year, you could lose that just like that. But also knowing that perhaps there's a possibility we're bringing in a team who's going to be, for lack of better terms, a road warrior in sports, which we've seen that with some of our schools as they're going through construction. The new members are going through a construction phase where they know once they are full members, that facility will be done. But if it's done during that process, I think we need to share that. And I think that's really vital.
Absolutely. I think some of that just goes back to our processes and procedures too at the NIAA, and making sure that, when we're looking at those renewal forms, we're comparing it to last year's. And if we see any changes, that we are making, the effort to go out and and vet, that area.
Kate, I agree. I think you ought to add that to the new renewal form. If any facilities have changed, they need to specify what those are so that can be done, because I think that's a real important point, based on what we've seen happen this year already. Also, I really like this form. It helps emphasize to new schools coming in that, this isn't just some, joining some association on a whim. There's a lot of requirements that go into it. And I mean, and I'm not picking on American Heritage, but their presentation, there was discussion about how they had a basketball game going on with a divider up in the gym, and they had a 6th grade, PE class going on, right next door, and you just can't be doing those things. And so I think it's important to emphasize to all these new schools that come in, and I'm not picking on charters or privates, but that's mostly what we're seeing anymore. They need to understand the significance of belonging to a state high school athletic association. It's not something that's just easily granted. There's a lot of requirements that they have to meet. And I think in past years, with some of the applicants have not really appreciated all that. So I think this is a good way to do that.
Great, thanks. All right. Anything else on this?
One thing I'd like to add about facilities, Michael Strong, Pranegat Valley, is the scheduling of those facilities gets really, really difficult. We've got, just in the southern 1A, we've got 3 schools that don't have facilities on site for basketball. And so as we're putting together league schedules, and then trying to determine when we can play those games, how does it work? You got principals and school requirements when you're supposed to be in school. Those things get to be really difficult. And when they're changing facilities year to year, and maybe one year you're playing at a church, then the next year you're playing, at a community center, whatever it gets to be, it does get really tough on the scheduling aspect of it.
That's a great point.
And Kate, one thing I'd probably add to this list, I'm just looking over again, is playing surface. Is it a grass field? Is it a turf field?
Yep.
I know there's what kind of a court is it? Is it a wood court, tartan floor? What type of floor? I know, speaking from experience, I know Kingman Academy in Kingman, Arizona, they would play in their basketball games, volleyball games, like in a cafeteria, and it was a tile floor. And they had vending machines 2 feet out of bounds. And just one of those things, when we look at these places, what kind of a floor is it? Is it going to be a floor that, somebody goes, hey, we had this nice gym, great floor, but we had water damage, and so we have to play at a church or somewhere, and now the floor's, it's a tile floor, but it's lined, but what type of floor is it? So just for a safety aspect too, just make sure, maybe having what track, is it a cinder track? Is it a all-weather track? Because I know some places don't have all-weather tracks. Is it asphalt like Jay has at Lake Mead right now? Just giving you a hard time, Jay.
Awesome.
But I think that's,
Wouldn't expect anything less, Dave.
yeah, just trying to say anything that you
Yeah.
have there. I think that should
No,
be
that's
just
great.
added on there too, because I know when we play at different parks, even in scheduling wise, when all these fields go to turf, what kind of shoes are you going to wear for baseball? And
Yep. No, that matters. Okay. Anything else? Good. All right. The last item we have, item 10, is maintaining membership status. Again, we've kind of been hinting at this. So I just threw this on here. This is the regulation that Tim was mentioning prior about the dropping schools. It was brought up at the June Board of Control meeting to, have our committee or the Rules and Regulations Committee kind of just take a look at the regulations that we do have or the regulations that we want to create in helping with that maintenance of membership and what possible penalties there would be if you drop programs. So I think it kind of all coincides with a lot of the different things that we're talking about, but there's aspects of membership I think that all need to kind of be combined in one place about the maintenance of membership, and this is part of that. So, Tim, do you want to talk about this a little bit? I know that you were really involved in it.
Yeah, because I moronically pushed hard on this without thinking of the fallout that was going to come from it. I pushed for this because we saw a uptick in schools that would offer a sport, then drop the sport, offer sport, drop the sport, or offer sport and then bring in another sport in the middle of a realignment cycle. And what they were doing was, for lack of better terms, they were reading the room. They saw where they were in a program, and you know what, we've got a lot of seniors, so we're not going to have a lot of kids. So the genesis of this was to stop that and to stem it off. The problem was in application was it inadvertently punished schools based on enrollment numbers. So a 1A school may have 8 kids graduate and 4 kids moving in the next year as freshmen. Program can't be sustained, so they have to drop the program. Well, the 1A and the 2A already had a system in place where they came back as independent status. So we're going to work on getting that added a caveat. I think the simplest caveat to put in there is, or at the discretion of the executive director, so those things can be worked out. But what I really think is important here is when we have schools that come in with programs, 2 programs in the fall, winter, and spring, as we prescribed, they get full membership and then they dump everything and become a single sport school. That's where this really needs to be addressed, because are they full members if they aren't offering programs that they can field and sustain? Then it becomes an issue is who are we to decide what they can field and sustain? So then are we micromanaging? So this is a delicate tightrope that we're walking on this one, but I do believe there needs to be some guidance put in or some regulation written that allows us to review the status of a member and what their programming is and what they're doing, and perhaps have them come to the board or whatever this committee can come up with as a regulation, but something that holds us accountable as an association to the full members who are fulfilling their league obligations and their postseason participation, at the same time as allowing for the group that the schools that may have enrollment issues, like we just heard, and they're doing their best. That this is I don't want to say this is like a cause, but for me, it's important that we have good members fulfilling their obligations and providing opportunity for kids. So with that, Kate, I'll stop.
That's great. Okay, thoughts on this, because I think this is a big one. So Tim, as far as, sorry, one more thing, but as far as the addition of the discretion of the executive director, that do you want done with the Rules and Regulations Committee, not here for that piece of it?
Yeah, that would be
Okay.
something rules and regs would have to come up with.
Okay. So for us, I think it's really just starting to think about how we could either add to this regulation or create a new regulation or add to the existing membership regulations regarding exactly what Tim was saying. You know, is there a process in place for reviewing the status of a member once they're a member to maintain and keep them accountable for fulfilling their requirements? And how do we put that together? And I think that's really one of our biggest jobs here in this committee, and what I really want to focus on moving forward is how do we navigate that carefully? Because I think Tim's also correct in that how do we really fully determine that they can't field a team based on, you know, how do we know of those kids that they have at their school that they don't have enough kids that are interested in that sport to do it, or maybe they do and they're just like, no, we're not going to have that sport because we want to focus on this sport. You know, it's a very delicate thing. I think you're 100% right, Tim, in that. So I think it's tough and we have our work cut out for us, but I do think it's something that we need to consider to make sure that we are keeping the integrity of our association and the member schools that we have, and in keeping everybody accountable. So open that up for any other discussion.
I could tell you from a 1A perspective, just even in the South, I'm just looking at, I've got daughters coming up, so I'm very invested in what happens with our girls sports team opportunities. And we've got teams, that they'll field a volleyball team, but then there's no girls basketball team. Everybody will have a boys basketball team. Those ones it seems like I feel like every school can provide that. But even just having opportunities for the girls in our state to have more participation. And, I don't know how you fix that, but I feel like if you could field a volleyball team or even a softball team, there should be opportunities somehow to get girls basketball. I know like boys football is a tough one because you're never going to, you can't force kids to play football. And you can't force kids to play sports in general, but I think it's hard to, put a bunch of regulations saying you're going to play football, you're going to do this, especially with all the, concussions and things that are out there. Those are tougher, but I even think just looking at it from a girl's perspective, how we provide more opportunities for the girls in our state to participate.
Definitely, I agree. I think that's the tough part too. It's a lot of it too has to do with, the culture at your school. And if that's the expectation, some coaches are going to be more like, nope, you're a volleyball player. You're going to play volleyball year round. And some schools and coaches are going to have more of the philosophy of, hey, we want you well-rounded. You're going to play volleyball, then you're going to go out and play basketball, and you're going to keep, building different skills. So that's a cultural thing sometimes at a school. That's a coach mentality thing at some schools. So I do see that, in our smaller schools, it is tough. You'd think they'd be able to field, a team of 6, but they're not, and we don't know the reason. And I think that's some of the difficulty in making regulations around this is we don't necessarily know the reasons. But I do like Tim's idea of maybe we do put something in place and then you have to come to the board if you can't field your team, and you need to explain that. Here's my enrollment numbers. Here's the girls that signed up. Here, here's what we did to try to recruit kids out. I mean, very similar to what you would do in a Title IX, situation. If you had a Title IX violation, and how would you explain that you don't have as many girls coming out as boys? It's kind of the same concept of how come we can't field this team? So I like that concept. Other thoughts? All right. Well, if there's nothing more, we can move on to just talking about some future plans. I do think we've talked quite a bit about where we want to move, but I just wanted to get from everybody here some ideas of things that we want to talk about in a future meeting. And I'll put some of my ideas here too, but I just want to hear from you guys first if there's other things outside of what we talked about today, or anything else, or specifics about today that you would like to see come back for a future meeting.
Hey, Dave Henneman. One thing I know this was brought up I heard about it at the Board of Control last week. What about teams that just no show for games? It's a scheduled game, it's a league game or whatever, and they just decide not to show up. Like, the only repercussion we basically have is, oh, you forfeit the game. And I think that this is horrible. Like, if we're here for kids, what about all those kids that just lost out on a game that they could have had a game that they were going to play? It's my feeling. I think there should be some bigger repercussions. And I know as a membership, looking at things besides just forfeiting, because if I have a field hockey team that hasn't won a game and I decide, you know what, I'm not going to go up to Prump and play them in field hockey. And I know nobody has field hockey. That's why I'm just saying field hockey. But my but I have like a girls sport, like it's pretty like lacrosse. That's really good. Like, I'll take that forfeit in field hockey and save money on bus and transportation like that. But then maybe doing like a repercussion, saying, you know what, this is going to affect other sports too. Where say, like, I might have a really good lacrosse team that could be a state contender. Well, guess what? Now we could maybe put a rule saying you got that forfeit in field hockey, but now your lacrosse team now is ineligible this season too. Like putting in different things like that, just so that teams don't just say, you know what, I'm not going to show up because it's too far, or we're going to get beat by 60 points or whatever.
Mhm.
So that's just something I'm throwing out right now. So that might want to think about.
Yeah, I definitely think, if we create or extend any of these regulations to specify your maintenance of membership, I think that should be a piece of it is, you're not canceling games. We do have a regulation 306 says a school shall not cancel a game, contest, or meet unless it obtains approval of the executive director. And then subsection 3 of that says the association may suspend the membership of a school in the association if the school violates any provision of the section. So we do have a regulation. I don't know
Yes.
that there's been any actual, use of that regulation in any sense, but I think we could definitely do more there. I think that's a great conversation to have, and that I think is a conversation that needs to be had here and say, moving forward, we're going to actually impose this regulation and have there be some consequences to that, because I agree that's taking opportunities away from kids. You're costing people time, money, and effort. That's a big deal. It's a big deal for sure. So, but I'll put that on the agenda for next time so we can, talk further about it, but great point. Other ideas for concepts going into the next meeting?
Yeah, I thought that was great that David brought that up in that situation. I also like the fact that when we bring issues up like that, that we also have some possible solutions to that. And he did that as well. I think in our regulation, one of the things that we have to do is follow up on that regulation. I think it has to have a little bit more meat and substance to it. For example, if a team violates that provision of our regulation twice in a season, that they lose the opportunity to play that sport the following year. That gives it some pretty significant bite in terms of if a team knows that after their, you know, first first time doing this, it's my understanding with this specific school that did they do it earlier this year already, or was it done last year?
Rollins,
Tim?
just to give you, without going into too many details, hadn't been a conversation with that school when that information was shared with the board. So there was only one half of the story. We've actually assessed more of the actual situation, but it was not this year. It was last year. There was a
Okay.
situation last year and a situation this year.
Okay.
But to that point, I definitely think that's something the Rules and Regulations Committee can definitely look at, because I do believe this regulation needs some more teeth. It needs to have a
Yes.
little bit more bite to it, because it is a problem, and the concerns are raised are, I'm going to put my old CCSD hat back on. Transportation, sometimes there's no control over transportation, but the communication step is important. How they communicate with the other school. I think that might be something the Rules and Regulations Committee could look at. What are the processes you're going to go through to ensure that when a game is missed, it's just not, oh, we're just not showing up, or we don't have enough players, we're not going to play. Because I can remember, I'm going to go even further back, when I was an athletic administrator, I had a situation where we were playing a team that was sending half their team to a tournament out of state, and they had remained with would be considered a JV program at that time. And one of our coaches didn't want to play them because they were JV. And I remember Ray Mathis calling and saying, no, you have a league obligation to play this match. You will play. And we did, and we won. I don't understand why my coach didn't want to win a game. But at the same time, the threat of being sanctioned by the NIAA was right there. So I think the time has come to bring that to the forefront, and require schools to meet their obligations. I mean, you're a member. You have a job to do. Any other association you're a member of, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, they don't have you as a member for long. And I'm talking, social clubs and et cetera like that. I mean, AAA has a requirement, and you better do what they tell you to do, or you're not going to be a AAA member anymore. So I want this to be brought up with the Rules and Regulations Committee as well.
All right. Any other items? I'm obviously going to bring back most of what we talked about today for things that we might need to take action on. So that will be, forthcoming, but anything new, different, other things we didn't talk about that we might want to bring back for the next meeting. All right, move on to item 12, public comment. This time provides an opportunity for citizens to address the committee about any matter not on the agenda. Items raised during this portion of the agenda cannot be deliberated or acted upon. Should a member of the public wish to speak on a matter not listed on the agenda, it is asked that said person please complete a green public comment card and submit it to the committee chair prior to the opening of this item. A limit of 3 minutes per person and or 5 minutes for the spokesperson of a particular group may be imposed. It is requested that comments be directed to the committee as a whole. Comments that are determined to be irrelevant, repetitious, offensive, inflammatory, willfully disruptive, or deemed to be personal attacks will not be permitted. Anybody in the office, Tim? Yeah.
No one's.
And I did not get anything for public comment, so that will conclude that. So at this time, we will adjourn the meeting unless there's anything else. And I appreciate everybody's time, and we'll be reaching out for